Hello everyone, have a nice day. Previously, in The Unfinished Debt, Uri and Tu Tieu stood at the edge of hard truths and chose to keep going. Today, in The First Kiss When Peace finally found Uri and Tu Tieu, it's just the two of them, lanterns swaying, wind-dried persimmons glowing, and a gentle, deliberate first kiss that turns a half-finished porch into a home. No noise, no crowd, only breath, soft light, and two hands learning how to hold. If you find it interesting, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next videos. Their mouths meet before any word can ruin it. Lantern light trembles against wood. Ropes of persimmons lift and fall as if the wind can't decide whether to interrupt. Tu Tieu's breath touches Uri's skin, first warmly, carefully, then her lips, soft and certain. It isn't urgent. It's deliberate, like setting a cup on a shelf you just built and trusting it will hold. His hand finds the small of her back. Her palm gathers the fabric at his shoulder. For one long heartbeat, the orchard forgets how to make sound. He slows before she has to ask. She doesn't move away. The kiss is an answer to a question they've both been carrying, like a quiet ache. It's the first moment in months that doesn't examine itself for threats. When they part, not far. The air between them feels rinsed, new, awake. That felt real, she whispers, still close enough for the word to rest against his mouth. It is, he says, and the steadiness in his voice is the kind that isn't performed. It's home. A moth circles a lantern, changes its mind, and drifts into the darker air. The ropes creak once, approving. In the open doorway behind them, 2 cups of tea wait, sending up slow curls of steam like patient handwriting. Earlier morning had started as if the world remembered how to be gentle. Lemon trees wore dew the way children wear medals. Proud, undeserved, bright. Uri stood under the eaves measuring a beam. The pencil behind his ear, a small crown for a man who builds instead of fights. Every swing of his hammer landed true, not hard, just sure each strike a vote for staying. Tu Tieu came down the narrow path, basket in her arms, persimmons piled like sunrise. She set a straw mat on the porch and lined the fruit in neat rows, her fingers going calm the way fingers do when the heart wants to keep up. He'd looked up, caught her watching, and grinned as if the grin had been standing by all morning waiting for its cue. "You've been timing me," he teased. "Counting your mistakes," she shot back, ruining the seriousness of it with a smile she forgot to hide. Later, he'd crouch beside her, their hands tangling on the same loop of twine. "Stem needs space," he said, tying slowly. "Let the wind do its part." "And if the wind doesn't?" she asked. "Then we teach it how to pay its debts." They had worked in an easy parallel, not talking as much as noticing. The sound of sandpaper, the thin perfume of green wood, the warm swing of fruit when a small gust passed. Now and then, she would look up and find him already looking. Nobody apologized for it. Back to now. The lanterns, their little sons. The night, it's a friend at last. They sit on the porch step with the kind of closeness that doesn't ask permission twice. Uri passes her a cup. Porcelain clicks gently against her nail. "You've been at this all day," he says. "So have you," she answers. The porch feels safe. He nods toward the eaves. "You've turned the house into a place that knows how to listen." "And you gave it a voice," she says. And it's not a line, just a truth they both recognize. He looks at her, like a man who's finally learned where to rest his gaze. She looks back, like someone who's quit running inside her own head. The quiet isn't empty. It's a room they both fit inside. What did peace sound like before? She asks. Like wishing, he says. Like telling myself to wait. And now? He doesn't answer with a sentence. He leans in again, slower, simpler. The second kiss is softer than the first, but it's braver. Her fingers climb to the back of his neck, find the warm edge of hair, and hold. The lanterns hum. The lines under their eyes forget to be lines. A moment later, they pull back, and laughter arrives, not loud, not careless, just the kind that comes when something finally clicks into place. Okay, she says, breath smiling. Now I'm hungry. For tea or for courage? He asks. For the persimmons that aren't ready yet, she says, and they both laugh at the impatience of sweetness. He rises and disappears into the kitchen, the house half finished. Stubborn, beloved answers him with a soft floor creak and the proud silence of a new shelf that was waiting to be useful. He returns with a small plate, salt, ginger, a slice of unripe fruit, just to taste what tomorrow will correct. Too soon, she predicts. We've been too late to do enough things, he says. Let's try too soon for once. She bites, winces, laughs. You were right about the knot, she concedes. Wrong about this. Good, he says. Balance. They share the plate anyway, trading the slice back and forth between sips of tea, letting the heat chase the wrongness out of the tart. The night presses closer, like a blanket someone finally remembered to pull up around their shoulders. Say it, she murmurs. What? Whatever it is you've been carrying. She turns slightly. Her knee touches his, and neither of them moves to correct the map. He breathes. The sound is even. I keep waiting for the gate to slam, he admits, for a voice to arrive with the worst version of the story, for peace to be a trick the wind plays before it takes the fruit. She nods, as if she'd been listening to that very sentence inside his chest all day. Me too. And yet, he says, tipping his head toward the eaves, the fruit stays. She follows his gaze. The persimmons hang without drama lanterns that choose to be patient. We will too, she says, and is surprised to hear how easily the will lands. He reaches for her hand like it's a familiar tool and a fragile thing at once. Their fingers thread. A new rhythm enters the scene, the soft tick of pulse against pulse. He studies the lines on her palm with the mild awe of a carpenter meeting grain he can trust. Let's keep building, he says, not because he needs to fill the air, but because the air is finally ready to keep promises. Together, she answers, and it doesn't echo, it roots. They rise. She moves along the eaves, lantern by lantern, pinching each flame higher with a careful twist of the wick. He follows with a small wooden stool, steadying it with his foot whenever the boards complain. In this choreography hand, light, step, breath, the house learns their names and repeats them back in the creak of new timber. He watches her tie the final strand of twine around the last fruit for the day. You know, he says, you do it exactly right now. She smiles over her shoulder. The teacher was persuasive. The student was brave. She hops down from the stool and lands in the narrow space between him and the rail. They don't step apart. The night decides, kindly, to mind its own business. How do we keep this? She asks. There's no panic in it, only curiosity, the kind people feel when they find water in a place that used to be dry. We name it, he says. We build around it. We refuse to let wind do all the work. A small breeze tests the ropes again, finds them sound, and moves on. Somewhere beyond the orchard, a road is being quiet on purpose. Somewhere in the kitchen, the new shelf holds 2 cups like a benediction. She leans forward this time first and kisses him with the steadiness of a person who no longer negotiates with her own fear. He meets her halfway and a little more. It lasts long enough for the moth to change its mind twice, for the steam to thin, for the house to notice and approve. When they part, she rests her forehead to his. Peace, she says, as if trying the key in a lock. It fits. It does, he answers, and it closes behind us. They stay there until the quiet becomes their friend instead of a test. The lanterns sway and settle. The fruit keeps its own slow calendar. They breathe the same measured air. Above them, the eaves murmur in the language of rope and wind. Stay, stay, stay. Dawn spills in like warm milk. The lanterns sleep out, just the palest smoke twisting above their wicks. Dew beads along the ropes. The persimmons wear tiny crowns of water. The first bird tries a note, forgets it, tries again. Tu Tieu stands barefoot on the porch, sweater over her nightshirt, hair gathered in a soft knot, as if the night's gentleness is still deciding to stay. Behind her, the house breathes. Wood cooling, wood waking, wood remembering hands. Uri steps out carrying a blanket for her shoulders. Cold? A little, she says, and lets the blanket settle. It smells like the sun from yesterday and soap from long before that. They don't talk about the kiss. They don't have to. It has already moved into the space between them and begun tidying up, stacking cups neatly in the new shelf, airing out the old corners where doubt used to live. Tea? He asks. Only if you're having some. They drink on the step, knees touching, watching the orchard shrug itself into morning. When a stronger breeze pushes through, the ropes answer with the soft cluck of knots that hold. The fruit sways and resettles like a choir taking the next breath together. You were right, she says, nodding at the eaves. Stem needs space. You were brave, he says, and means far more than fruit. A small, practical day begins. Breakfast is rice porridge sweetened with a spoon of honey that refuses to be precise. He sands, measures, lifts, holds. She threads, ties, checks, listens. They exchange words as they pass tools and slices of pear, as they ask about nails and timing, and the kind of little choices that make a day feel like 2 hands smoothing the same sheet. Mid-morning, a thin truck coughs to a stop on the lane. Egan leans out, hair damp from the road, lifting a canvas bag in 2 fingers, the way men do when they know a story hides inside. Uri meets him at the gate, while Tu Tieu wipes her hands on her apron and lets her heartbeat choose whether to speed up. It does, then slows. The kiss did its work. Panic knows it isn't welcome here. It's from the district office, Egan says. Copies came through. He glances past Uri to the ropes of fruit, at the way peace looks like work done well. You two okay? Better than okay, Uri says, not a boast, but an inventory line. Egan's mouth turns. I'll leave you to it. He nods toward the canvas bag. Ledger pages, stamped. A note about the niche reserve preliminary inquiry, not a decision. He tilts his head, meaning, not today's storm. Tu Tieu takes the bag. Thank you. The words are steady. The wait is ordinary. Coffee later? Tomorrow, Egan says. Let the day be what it wants. They watch him go until the lemon trees take him back. Uri slides the bolt on the gate, a soft slide, not a barricade. Peace is not pretending the world doesn't exist. It's learning which door to close and which to leave open to light. Inside, at the table, the stamped pages settle beside a plate of sliced ginger. The red seals look like small doors that someone finally locked behind a thief. Tu Tieu runs a finger along the margin and stops where ink pools a little deeper. We keep reading, she says, but not now. Not now, he echoes, and sets a wooden ruler across the stack as if to say, we will measure this too, but later. The wind leans in with noon in its voice and tests the knots again. The first white cloud widens. Low to the west, a dark seam stitches itself along the horizon. You feel that? Uri asks, eyes on the eaves. Rain? She says. Maybe, he answers, already moving. We'll need more space under cover. They slide the long bamboo poles a handspan closer to the wall. She gathers the lowest strings of fruit. He adds a second line of twine to anchor the whole ribbon of sweetness to a supporting hook. The rhythm becomes urgent, but not frantic. Tug, tie, check, nod. He drags out the old blue tarp with the patch shaped like a clumsy heart. She smooths it across the top edge, binding it with short lengths of rope, just tight enough to bow to water, but not to sag. Uri, she says. Will the shelf hold it if it gets wet? It will. He taps the bracket he sunk into the post yesterday. And if not, I'll make a better one. Okay, she says, believing him. Believing them. The first drops arrive like shy guests. 1, then 3, then a small applause on the tarp. The smell changes. Lemon leaf, wet earth, fresh rope. Thunder speaks from far away in the friendly voice of a man who's still on the road and thinking about dinner. They stand under the eaves and watch the rain find its way down every angle, along every knot. The persimmons swing once, twice, then settle into the new rhythm. Water streams off the tarp in tidy curtains. The porch darkens and seems to grin. Looks good, Uri says, wiping his hands on his jeans. We look good, she says, and the rain tries to hide her smile unsuccessfully. Lightning makes a soft, white photograph of them, two figures at the line where weather ends and shelter begins. He reaches for her hand, not out of fear, not out of habit, but because storms are better counted together. Her fingers meet his easily, as if they practiced this in a dream for years. Inside, they wait it out. She heats sweet potatoes until the skins split with a sigh. He opens the canvas bag and closes it again, a promise rather than an avoidance. They eat at the window, shoulders touching, watching the orchard laugh under the weather. Tell me a thing I don't know, she says, blowing on a bite. He considers. My hammer's not straight. The handle is a hair off center. I keep it anyway because it taught me to correct without force. She nods. I sometimes hum when I'm scared, so I'll trick my breath into behaving. I know, he says, smiling. You hum on the inhale. And you measure on the exhale, she returns. The rain pulls its last thread. Light stitches the sky back open. The orchard blinks, wet and pleased with itself. They step outside into a world washed clean, the tarps shedding their final beads, the knots proud and small. Nothing fell. Uri peels the tarp back, one knot at a time, laying it to dry along the fence. Tu Tieu checks each rope for looseness, reties 2, approves the rest. When she looks up, he's watching her with that quiet, anchored gaze, the one that says, "I'm here for the careful work." "What?" she asks, half laughing. "Nothing," he says. "Everything." He gestures at the eaves. "You fixed the wind's bad habits." "We negotiated," she says. "It can have the sound. We keep the sweetness." They carry the ledger pages to the shelf under the window. He sets a flat stone on top of a humble weight, not a guard. She tucks a dried sprig of lemongrass into the twine that binds the stack. It looks like a small, stubborn bouquet. "I was thinking," she says, tracing a knot in the wood grain with her thumbnail, "about the niche reserve, if they ask again." "We answer with light," he says, nodding toward the eaves, "with copies and a voice that doesn't shake, with fruit that dries where anyone can see it, with work they can't call a rumor. And with us," she says, allowing herself the word. "And with us," he repeats, and the echo doesn't feel like a repeat at all. It feels like a plank laid true. Afternoon slips into the softer hour that promises soup if you're patient. They sweep the porch, stack a neat pile of offcuts that will be kind to a future fire, and chalk a simple line on the post where tomorrow's shelf should begin. He marks measurements in pencil and adds quietly, "We'll carve names under here when the wood has cured. Nothing big, just proof." "A date," she says, "and a word," he adds. "Peace," she offers. "Peace," he agrees. Evening returns wearing warm colors. The lanterns accept flame with the small, grateful sound of a wick remembering its purpose. The ropes of persimmons become golden notes on a stave only they can read. Somewhere beyond the orchard, a motorbike passes like a thought that doesn't need to become a worry. They sit where they sat last night. They don't try to rewrite perfection. They let it rhyme. Tea again. Steam again. A month again. Indecisive and forgiven. "This morning," she says, "I woke up before the birds and thought, if it was a dream, let me fall back in." "And?" he asks. "It wasn't," she says. "I tried just to be sure." He laughs low, delighted. "Good. Stay awake with me." "I will," she says. And then, because some words prefer proof, she turns and kisses him. It's not about firsts anymore. It's about practice. About strength without weight. About choosing to belong, again and again, on purpose. When they part, he rests his forehead against hers. "Tomorrow? Build. Hang. Read," she lists, "and maybe burn the bad pages in the stove when the district sends the good ones back." "And kiss?" he asks, shameless as sunlight. "And kiss," she says, equally shameless, "between the knots." They lean back and look up. The eaves hold a sky made of fruit and patience. The wind tests a note and finds it sweet. Above them, the persimmons sway in a slow, content rhythm. No hurry, no fear, whispering to the house in the language of rope and time. Kept, kept, kept.
Trong nụ hôn đầu khi hòa bình, cuối cùng cũng tìm thấy Uri và Tử Tiêu. Vườn cây ăn quả trở thành nơi tôn nghiêm, nơi tình yêu được thực hành theo những bước nhỏ bé đều đặn. Uri xây dựng và đo lường, Tử Tiêu buộc hồng treo gió, và dưới ánh chiếc đèn lầu màu hổ phách, nụ hôn đầu của họ rơi xuống như một câu trả lời, không phải một câu hỏi. Một buổi sáng mang đến công việc và sự sáng tỏ. Egan giao các bản sổ sao sổ cái và có đống dấu ghi chú về một cuộc điều tra sơ bộ vào Nietzsche, bằng chứng dự trữ được đảm bảo. Sự hoảng loạn được xua tan. Một cơn mưa bất chợt thử thách các nút thắt, thanh xà và lời thề. Không có gì rơi xuống. Cùng nhau họ chuyển các cột, neo dây và chọn ánh sáng thay vì bí mật. Lao động hữu hình, lời nói được cân nhắc và sự thật được chép lại. Đến tối, mái hiên giữ lại ngọt ngào và lòng dũng cảm thầm lặng, họ lên kế hoạch ngày mai sẽ xây dựng, treo, đọc và đốt những trang xấu khi công ty trở lại. Hứa sẽ gìn giữ hòa bình bằng cách tạo ra nó hết lần này lần khác, với sự quan tâm khéo léo như nụ hôn giữa các nút thắt.